Well, hi, Stu Bamey, coming to you from Pawleys Island, South Carolina. And we're in a series, Miracles That Jesus Still Works. And in this message, I want to talk about a woman who had nowhere to turn in her life. She was desperate. Mark writes, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. Because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. So there's a couple things I want you to notice about this story. First is the touch of desperation. She had no human solution to her problems. One day, Mark tells us, there's a large crowd following Jesus. Everyone wanted to see what Jesus was going to do. He had been doing miracles and teaching in a way that people had never heard of before, so they couldn't wait to see Jesus. And as he was walking along with the crowd, he ran into a woman who, Mark says, was suffering a great deal. She had a physical problem for 12 years, this unrelenting, continuous discharge of blood. Something was broken, and she couldn't fix it. She had a physical problem. But in addition, she had a spiritual problem because Levitical law required her to declare that she was unclean because of her bleeding. She would have to get into a crowd, wherever she was, in the street or in the marketplace, and warn everyone, stay away, unclean, unclean, unclean. She was cut off from her friends, her family, everyone she knew. This uncleanliness was the ultimate disgrace. She simply didn't belong in the presence of God and in the presence of other people. She was on the outside looking in. This was a desperate, broken woman. And Mark says she had spent all that she had on many doctors. She took all of her savings and invested them to try to get better. Who could help me? Who can help me? Who can help me? But instead of getting better, she got worse. She had tried everything and derived no benefit from anyone's treatment. She had come up empty. Nothing had worked. There was no human solution. This reminds me of our world. Sociologists tell us that there have been 21 civilizations since the beginning of written history. And all of those civilizations have followed the same path. There's a birth, a rapid growth, there's a leveling off, and a dramatic decline due to moral decay. When moral values get all switched around and no one cares what God has to say, they're concerned about their own feelings and their own liberties. Yeah. We all have this sense that something's broken in our culture, don't you? Because those historians say we're living in the 22nd culture and we're facing a moral decline. From Bud Light to Ken and Barbie, that people are desperate to answer the questions of who am I and where am I headed and what should I do and what's the point of this? Why do I exist? And there seems to be no human solution. I mean, on our news shows, we see the expert panel shows up every evening. And they share their views, but there's one view that is conspicuously absent. What I want to know is not what you think or what you have to say. I want to know, what does God have to say? Because only God can change the human heart and provide an ultimate solution. Well, there was one thing this woman hadn't tried. She hadn't tried Jesus. She needed to come to the Creator, the Master. She was looking to Him. Maybe as a last resort, she's desperate. On the outside looking in, maybe Jesus could do something. She was a broken woman who doesn't belong. And she thought, well, what if I sneak up behind Him? Because I'm unclean, I'd have to warn everybody. What if I snuck up behind Him and just touched the edge, the hem of His garment, of His cloak? In the Hebrew, the shimla, a large four-cornered cloak. What if I just touched that and slipped away? Maybe something would happen. Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" And the disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. The second thing I want you to notice here is a look of transformation. And in that transformation, everything changed in this woman's life. Immediately, the blood stopped. 12 years of constant suffering, gone. Jesus did what no one else could do. He gave her new life. He healed her. And he realized that power, dunamos in the Greek, had gone out from him. Someone, he's saying here, a clearer translation, someone took hold of me. So he turned around and he said, "Who touched me?" Now, the disciples and the crowd, they're pressing all around. Well, Jesus, lots of people are touching you, but Jesus knows that only one person touched me with a need at this moment, a desperate need. And I felt the power go out. So he keeps looking around the crowd. Someone touched me. I mean, when you touch Jesus, you know what he does? He stops dead in his tracks. He's looking for you. And in this case, their eyes meet. There is a moment for this woman when the whole universe immediately stopped, and she realized that God, the God of the universe, expressing himself in Jesus, was preoccupied with her. Her touch led to a gaze, a transformation, a connection. It was transformational for her. When we look into the eyes of Jesus, our lives are changed. Reach out and touch and look into the eyes of Jesus. And when we do, our lives are different. We make decisions differently. We see the future differently. Our whole outlook on life changes. I mean, what if this story really happened? What if it's really true? Then it would mean that Jesus is transformational in your life and mine. There was a time when I took my youngest son to the local amusement park, and he was just tall enough to reach up to the top of these little plywood people that they had sitting beside each of the adult rides to make sure you were tall enough to enter the ride and take a part of the ride. And I wanted him to ride his first roller coaster. It's called the Thunderbolt, man. It's crazy. It's an old wooden roller coaster. It throws you back and forth around and up. You feel like you're being thrown upside down. And I could tell he was nervous about riding this roller coaster, but I said, "Come on, let's go do it." We paid, gave our tickets to the attendant, got in line, and he could hear people shouting and screaming and the loud noises, the clanging noises of the roller coaster. And so finally we got, there on the platform where you're waiting in line, and I said, "Let's try to get in the front row, front seat." And we did. And we got strapped in, and there's a bar you could hold on to, and he was gripping that bar so tightly, and all of a sudden the roller coaster started off. Then it goes up, 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 up for its first drop. And he's looking around going, I've never been in anything this high before. I mean, I could see him looking out the side. And then all of a sudden we got to the top, and it went right down like falling off of a cliff, and then hit the first turn and the second, and we started to get thrown around and around and around. And he decided he didn't like this ride. I could see he was gripping that bar so tightly. And he said, Daddy, make it stop." And I said, I can't make it stop. We have to finish the ride. "But Daddy, I'm afraid." And I said, okay, look into my eyes. I held onto the bar myself, and I put my arm around him and said, "Look into my eyes until the end of this ride. Look into my eyes." And he did. And finally we reached the end, and we got out of the roller coaster car and walked down the ramp and sat at a park bench. And I said, so what did you think? And he said, well, I really didn't like that ride at all. It made me really afraid. But as long as I was looking into your eyes, I was okay. I was okay. Isn't it that way with life? Transformational. It's transformational. When we look into the eyes of Jesus, when we look at our fears, when we look at the twists and the turns of life, of course we're going to get afraid. When we look at Jesus and trust in him, he provides peace in our lives. Well, we went on to ride that roller coaster 3 more times that day. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and, trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. A word of revelation. God speaks. He communicates to her. He tells her what now has happened. God has not left us alone, sort of as a cosmic guessing game of who am I and where did I come from? No, not only does God act in history, but he interprets that action through his Holy Scriptures. He tells us who he is, who we are, who God is, how we got here, why we exist, and how we're to live life, what everything means. So the woman comes forward trembling, stumbling, falls at his feet, and she told him the whole truth. There's an admission. It was me. I was suffering. I had tried everything. I was desperate. I had nowhere to turn. I was on the outside looking in. I'm unclean. I don't fit. I don't belong. I could find no human solution. And Jesus said to her, daughter, we don't know her name, but God does. Daughter, he called her daughter. I love that. You're a child of my family. You're a family member. Daughter, son, you're mine. One of mine. He tells her, it is your faith that has healed you. Now, keep in mind, there is no power in faith. The power is in the object of our faith. Jesus said, if you have faith in me, you could move mountains. Faith the size of a mustard seed. Well, it's not the faith that's moving the mountain. It's the object of the faith. It's God himself. Faith is the coupling, like a coupling of an engine of a train to the cars. It links us to the power in the cars. We get connected. We get connected to Jesus, to the very character and the nature of the Creator God and his Son Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit, who cares about us and loves us. He says that touch, it was just a touch. It was just a gaze. That's all it takes is the touch, the gaze into the eyes of Jesus. That's all. I'm telling you now, I'm communicating to you what it takes. Just gaze upon me. Look deeply into my eyes. You may not believe in all that you can believe about me. I don't expect that. You're growing in your faith. You're not mature yet. But I'm there. I'm real. I'm alive. Just gaze into my eyes. Several years ago, I was doing an Easter sunrise service at an inn on the ocean, and people had gathered. We had a speaker system, and they were gathered outside looking over the beach, and we were going to wait for the sun to rise, and then I was going to give my message, only it was so cloudy and stormy that you couldn't see the sun. But we could tell that maybe the sun had risen because it got a little lighter. And my point at that moment was, look it, we can't see the sun, right? We can't see it, but it's there. It's still there. You just have to trust it's there. It's there. It's what's bringing the light, even in times when you can't see it. See, I think that sometimes it's not so much that Christianity is untrue, it's just that it's untried. Look it today. Take a moment, reach out, touch the hem of his garment. We have no human solution to your problems, my problems, the world's problems. But everything changes when we look into the eyes of Jesus. God come to be known and touched, to dwell among us. Look into his eyes. Release, let go, touch the hem of his garment, and go home a new person.